How are you? And thanks for tuning in to another video from The Open Author. My name is David B. Lyons, and today I'm going to be detailing my top 10 tips on how you can start writing your debut novel. Now, there's a lot in this, but I'm going to get through it as swiftly as I possibly can because we don't want these videos to be too long. So actually, let's get straight down to it. Okay, so 10 top tips that will help you start your debut novel. I've had so many people contact me, as I've said to you before, since I signed my first publishing deal, asking me, I want to write a book, how do I go about it? Which is really the reason for an awful lot of these vlogs. But this one is going to detail the sort of tentative steps that you should take in order to write your first book. So tip number 1 is find your writing home. Now, I know this sounds like a bit of a shite tip, but bear with me for a second. Essentially, I've said this to you before, actually, 99% of people who want to write a novel don't finish a first novel. And the reason for that, more so than skill sets or ability or anything like this, the main reason for that is discipline. So when I say find your writing home, what I mean is it's up to you to write a book if you want to write a book. It's not just going to fucking magically appear, okay? So giving yourself the discipline to write that book is the most important thing that you will do. So what I want you to do when I say find your writing home is I want you to sort of schedule when you can fit your writing into your life, because we're all hectic these days. So you find times that you think, right, I'm going to give that over to writing this book because I've been threatening to write this book for 10 years and I'm going to do it. So you'll realize, or you'll find out by looking through your schedule, that perhaps a Wednesday evening and a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning are times that you can give over to your writing. So say you've got 3 hours there between those 3 times, an hour on Wednesday evening, an hour Saturday and Sunday morning each. Well, what I want you to do is find your writing home within those hours, okay? So whether that's, you know, maybe you have a small home, so you're going to have to work from the dining room table in the kitchen. Fine. Or maybe, you know what, I don't even have a dining room, I'm going to have to sit on the edge of my bed with my laptop, you know, perched on my lap. Or maybe you're lucky enough to have a studio and a desk to work from. But wherever it is, you need to find where your writing home is, and in those hours that you've given over to your writing, I want you to go up or down or across to that writing home. I want you to tell everybody you live with that you're taking an hour out, you don't want to be disturbed. And I want you to find seclusion in that writing home so you can focus on the task in hand. Because it's impossible to write a book if you don't find the right environment and give yourself the right time to write a book. If you don't give yourself the time and the environment to write, you ain't ever going to write that book. So it's very, very simple tip, but it's one that people just don't adhere to. If you want to write a book, you got to tap at keys. And in order to write a full novel of about 80,000 or 90,000 words, you're going to have to discipline yourself. First thing to do, find your writing home, put a stamp on it, and then find the times that you're going to be at that home typing away on the keyboard. And that is step number 1, discipline. Find your writing home. Now, tip number 2 when it comes to writing that debut novel is fucking read. Now, you have probably done a workshop, or maybe you've studied a bit of creative writing in college or university. Perhaps you haven't studied it at all. In fact, my vlogs are the only thing that sort of gives you any sort of insight into how you would go about writing a book. Fine, that's fine. As I've often said to you, you don't need academic qualifications to write a novel. There's so many things that I've taught at universities over the years that, you know, most of it is sort of insignificant. We're trying to cram so much stuff into a 3-year curriculum that most of it can sort of go by the wayside. You don't need an awful lot of it. There are some key tips, and I hope to detail them through all these videos that I do, or these vlogs that I do. But an awful lot of what you will study is sort of insignificant. But one thing that you can do to improve your ability to write is to read, and read in the genre that you wish to write in. So if you want to be a horror writer, I want you to read all the best horror novels that are out there. If you want to be a thriller writer, read all the best thrillers. If you want to be a romance writer, read the best romance books, and so forth and so forth. Whatever genre you want to write in, it's imperative that you read in that genre as much as you possibly can. You'll learn so much from it without even realizing that you're learning. You'll learn about pace. You'll learn about when and when not to use dialogue. You will learn about prose. You will learn different tones. You will learn about narrative style, about characterization, everything, all the ingredients that are required in a book. You will be learning them as you're reading, because you will be just be getting used to how stories are written. Now, you're not going to read a book a week and then become a great writer yourself. But if you are reading, you will find that an awful lot of the disciplines that are required to write in a book, you will be picking up subconsciously. So by the time when the time comes for you to write your prose and to begin writing your book, you'll find the flow that you have has sort of rubbed off on you from the books you read. So it's almost impossible, well, not impossible, but it's very, very difficult for you to become a writer if you're not reading. So I propose as a key tip that you read as much as you can in the genre that you wish to write in. Now, tip number 3 for you to start writing that debut novel is write what you would read. Now, I can give this tip based on some dismal history that I've had. When I started to write, I had this idea for this sort of love story that I thought was quite cute, and then I was about 30 or 40,000 words into it, and I read back over it and thought, I shouldn't be writing this book because I wouldn't read it. So if I wouldn't read it, why the fuck would I think anybody else would want to read it? And it sort of came to me that just because I had a good idea for a romance story doesn't necessarily mean I'm the man to write it, because all I consume in books, like the types of books I read, are crime thrillers or psychological thrillers. So it just makes sense that that's what I should write, because from reading I get to know the tone, I get to know the pacing of these stories and how they work. Whereas writing a romance story, it wasn't in my lane. I didn't know anything really about it, wasn't quite sure of the tone, because I don't read these books and I don't watch these types of movies or TV shows. So it wasn't up to me to write that story, and I was determined to write it because I had a good idea, and to this day I still think it's a good idea, but it's not for me to write that idea because I wouldn't be the audience for that book. So it's important that what you write, you yourself would read, because that makes total sense. As I said earlier on, if you wouldn't read it, why would you expect somebody else to read it? So you have to find your lane, find the genre that you love the most and that you read the most, and then that is the type of lane that you should be in when it comes to your writing. Now we're going to move on to tips that will help you structure your debut novel. So tip number 4 is know your ending. Now, I think this has popped up in my vlogs before. It certainly should have. It pops up in an awful lot of my lectures and the workshops that I do. Here's the thing. The 99% of people who don't finish the book that they promised themselves they would write, don't write it because they get lost. They probably get 10,000 words in and think, where the hell am I going with this? And sort of it becomes sloggy and not enjoyable, so they just leave it aside. It's left in some folder on their desktop. But if you know your ending from the outset, this is before you start writing, well then you're giving yourself light at the end of the tunnel constantly. You always know what direction you're heading in, so it gives you a massive advantage to finally finishing that debut novel. So listen, the whole process of writing a novel is called creative writing. So there's 2 words there, creative and writing. The writing is you tapping away at your keyboard and getting that story out. The creative is got nothing to do with your keyboard. It's got nothing to do with your laptop. So your creative is you thinking through and getting deep into that right side of the brain, the creative side of the brain, and thinking, what is my story going to be? What is this character going to be like? What is my story arc going to be like? What is my plot? What is my ending going to be? So I always suggest that before you start writing, you figure out what your ending is going to be. It doesn't mean you have to figure everything that happens up until the ending, but you need to know the ending because it gives you the light at the end of the tunnel. So one quick way to sort of understand what your ending will be is to ask yourself, how do you want your readers to feel when they close that book? When they've read your book, they've read the last sentence and they close the book, how do you want them feeling? Like, I always ask myself that question before I write my books, and the answer to that is I always want my readers to feel numb. I want my ending to go, that's what I want. So I'm looking for that reaction. So then I can work out what my ending is going to be based on the fact that I know how I want my readers to feel. So figure out how you want your readers to feel, and then that will help you bridge the sort of gap to you figuring out what your ending is going to be. And then that's fine. You just write down what your ending is going to be. John gets killed at the end. That's all. So you know where your story's going to go. So then you can begin the processes of writing that story. Once you know point Z, you know where the road is going to on your book. So we move on to tip number 5, which is get to know your main characters. Now this again is something that will happen before you begin writing. So we've moved on from things that you will do for discipline yourself, and now I'm giving you tips on creative processes you should go through before you start writing your novel. So get to know your main characters is quite simple. You just have to write out a simple bio for each of your main characters. Now you don't have to do it for all your characters. I'm talking about the 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 main characters that are involved in your whole story. So there are some simple questions that you can ask yourself to create that biography, and it doesn't have to be pages and pages of a profile of a character. It literally is just half a page is all I write. So I find an image that relates to that character. So I'll Google a sort of a detailed description of what my character looks like in my head. I'll find an image that relates to him or her. I will have that image in my mind, and then I will answer myself 6 or 7 strict questions that relate to the character. Now I've already done a video on this and how you can write your character bio and how you can make your characters come alive. So do check that out in my YouTube library. But I also have in a booklet, a free booklet that I will discuss at the end of this video that I've written that you can have for free, called my top 10 tips on how to write your first novel. Within that booklet is a detail of the questions you should ask yourself in order to complete a good character bio. But the whole idea of collating a character bio is to make sure that your character is consistent throughout your story. Because so many people start writing their first novel not really knowing what or who their character is, and their characters become inconsistent through the story. They change, and it doesn't have that sort of professional gleam to it. So get to know your main characters is a key tip that you should adhere to before you even start writing your novel. It will really help you with consistency through your whole plot arc. So we'll move on to tip number 6, which is decide your narrative style. Now, I have written in the booklet that this is my favorite of all the creative processes that I go through when I'm writing my novels. So your narrative style is basically how you tell your story. So you've already come up with a story idea. You've decided what your ending is going to be. You found out that you can discipline yourself because you found your writing home and you know the times that you're going to write in. You've already written your character bios. And now what you're doing is you're taking your story idea and you're thinking, what is the best way for me to tell that story? Should I tell it first person from this character's point of view? Or should I tell it maybe third person limited from this character's point of view? Or maybe third person limited from all the characters' points of view? Or maybe I should just tell this omniscient, as in I should just be an all-knowing narrator who's telling their story. Now, if you don't know what the narrative styles are, I also have done another video on that, but it's again detailed in the booklet that is free on my website. I said I will discuss that at the end of this video. So it's deciding how you tell your story is what deciding your narrative style is. And there's plenty of ways that you can tell your story. So I don't want you to think that you should default to third person or omniscient because that's how most of the books that you read growing up were told. Think about it. What is the best way your story can be told? Can it be told from one of the characters' points of view? Do you need to tell it omniscient because the narrator needs to know more than any of the characters know? So I hope I'm not going over your head there and talking about different sort of narrative styles that you're not aware of. They are quite simple. They are in the booklet, so you can have a look at them there. But I know I'm rushing through all this because there's 10 tips to get through and I want to limit the time of these videos so they're consumable for you. But deciding your narrative style is simple, but it's also one of the most creative processes you will go through when it comes to writing your book. So you need to do that before you even begin writing it, of course. And then we move on to disciplines that you might take on board when you're writing your book. So tip number 7 is show, not tell. Now, if you have been to any workshop or any lecture or any lessons on creative writing, show, not tell would have come up. Now, when I'm trying to think how old I was, I had hair. It was that long ago, okay? On the proper side of my head, not the bottom, on the top side of my head. I always wanted to be a writer. I thought I was a writer when I was a journalist, but I wasn't really. And I thought I really need to write books. How do I go about it? When I first learned about show, not tell, I was about 23, 24 years of age. A light bulb went off. I said, yeah, that's what writing is. It's showing, not telling. So we can all tell a story, right? I mean, I'm going to the pub tonight, it's Friday, I'm going to be talking to my mates. I'll be telling them stories of my working week and what I got up to this week, and they will be telling me stories. On Sunday, I'm meeting my mother-in-law and father-in-law for lunch. We will all sit around and tell each other stories. So we can all tell stories. We do that on a regular basis. But showing a story is what creative writing is all about. It's getting the points across you were trying to get across without just telling your reader. So a quick example is, if your character Jacinta, I like making names up off the top of my head. If Jacinta is sad, you don't just tell the reader by writing the sentence, Jacinta was sad. You paint on a description of her being sad without being obvious. And that's really what show, not tell is. Now you can do that with feelings, as we did there with the example of Jacinta being sad, but you would actually be doing this with your whole plot. So if Jacinta dies, she's shot, you don't just write Robert shot Jacinta in the head. You're painting on a description of that murder happening. So you don't just tell a story, you show a story through descriptive writing, and that's what show, not tell really is. So I have done a video on show, not tell that you should check out, because it goes into this in an awful lot more detail. But again, this is something that's detailed more in the booklet if you wish to get your hands on that free copy. Then we're going to move on to tip number 8 in you writing your debut novel that you should bear in mind, which is be subtle. Now, I've just explained about show, not tell, and why this is really the essence of what creative writing is. But we can go over the top with show, not tell, in that we can, have our characters. You have your character Jacinta walk into a room and you describe everything in that room because you want to bring it alive to your reader. But that's not great writing. Describing everything, describing every environment and describing what every character looks like is what we might think is good writing from the outset, but it's not. It's not what readers want to read. You need to be very subtle with your description of your characters, very subtle with your description of any environment or any room your characters walk into. It's also important that you're subtle with your plot, so you're not just telling the reader what's going on in this story. You're subtly drawing it on through your great descriptive writing. So really, what the great writers do, what the Stephen Kings and the J.K. Rowlings and the Cecilia Ahrens, all these people who are selling millions and millions of copies of books, the best in the business, why they are the best in the business is they understand show, not tell, that they understand that they have to show their story through descriptive writing, but they also understand that you have to be subtle in doing that. And it's those guys who find the right balance between that who are the best writers in the world. So that's what you have to do. You have to understand that you need to show, not tell, but you also have to understand that you need to be subtle when you're doing that. So finding your balance is what finding your voice is going to be as a writer. So you have to sort of strike the right chord in you getting your voice across. Then we're going to move on to tip number 9, which is kill those adverbs. Now, listen to me. I have worked with students of all age ranges. So I've worked with secondary school children who are sort of 15, 16 years of age, all the way up to people in their 70s and 80s who have always had an ambition to write a novel, and life is ticking on and they haven't done so. So I've worked with all age ranges, and wherever they are when they're first writing, they're first doing a bit of creative writing to show me examples of their work, it's littered with adverbs, because adverbs is something that we learn in secondary school, and it's something that we think is very descriptive. and we just tend to jam it in wherever we can. So, for example, an adverb, you should know this, but again, I have said that it's not academic writing. An adverb is a descriptive word that ends in ly. So you describe an action by using an ly word. So, for example, rather to describe how somebody's running, you might say he ran quickly. So the reason I asked you to get rid of the quickly and get rid of the adverbs, to kill your adverbs, is because you can think of better ways of writing he ran quickly. So if you find you're removing your adverb, then you just have he ran, you think, no, I want to say he ran quickly. Then you might think, oh, he raced or he paced. So you're plucking out a higher vocabulary word to describe rather than using the adverb. So that's why when you hear lecturers like me and other people talking about killing your adverbs, that's why they ask you to kill your adverbs, is because you're using an adverb as an easy path to describe something. Whereas if you kill it, you're more likely to come up with a higher vocabulary word to describe what it is you want to describe. And therefore, it makes your writing more vivid and more descriptive. So you will find that if you have written something before, say you've written a half a novel, 40,000 words, if you go back over it and take out every adverb you find, you will absolutely find that you're improving your novel, because you're removing the adverb and then you're coming up with a higher vocab word to replace it. And that is an instant improvement on the work that you've already done. Killing your adverbs is quite important, because what you'll find in an amateur manuscript is a manuscript filled with adverbs. But if you open a professional manuscript, you'll find very, very few adverbs. So it is a tip that I want you to bear in mind when you're going through the process of writing that first novel. And then we get on to my last tip that will help you, which is minimalize your dialogue. Now, this is again, like I explained to you there a second ago about adverbs being in amateur manuscripts, but not necessarily in professional. This is another telltale sign of the difference between a professional and an amateur manuscript. An amateur manuscript would rely on dialogue to carry that plot forward, whereas a professional won't. So if you're conscious that you shouldn't really be using dialogue unless it's essential to your story, well, then you will find you'll be relying on other things to carry your plot forward, other means. So more show not tell, more description, more sort of narrative carryover. So you're not going to rely on dialogue and allow your characters to tell the story to your reader. So minimalizing your dialogue is another key cog that will help you bridge amateur to sort of professional status. So do bear it in mind. As I said, it's all these 10 tips are written down in more detail in a free booklet that I have posted on my website. So I would like you to check it out. Here it is. It's called 10 Tips on How You Can Start Writing Your First Novel. It's absolutely free. You can just go to my website, theopenauthor.com. And if you scroll down once on the front page, you will see that novel is there, or that booklet is there for you to download. You just have to input your email address and it will be sent straight to you, and it will be downloaded straight to your Kindle or your whatever ebook device you use to read. So that is available to you. It's free of charge. I would recommend it if you are thinking of writing your first novel. What it does is it goes through the 10 tips that I've sort of brushed through rather quickly in this video in much more detail. So as I say goodbye to you, there will be a little screenshot that comes up with my website on it. That's where the free booklet is. Do check it out, and if I don't see you on my website, how about I see you at the next video. Talk to you soon.